they were looking at information. I mean, we're talking, take it out of the terrorism context for a second. A lot of this stuff was about COVID, which COVID for me was a massive, I think COVID is the biggest wake-up call we've had in this country about how quickly this place can go authoritarian. And it's not like we're through the storm. I think it's almost like a dry run. And it's one of the biggest political awakenings I've had, honestly, since the whole 9/11 era and everything that we saw and dealt with there. So
you think COVID was a dry run?
I think it's a dry run in terms of the way what I call the apparatus was able to make people do things that were objectively worthless and even crazy because they said so. The foundation of a totalitarian society is the ability to make people say, affirm, and even believe lies. This has always been the case. The Soviets, actually, it's fascinating when you go back and look at some of this. Lenin wanted to create a new Soviet man, and that, of course, was going to be somebody who was just 100% devoted to the revolution, 100% devoted to whatever it is they wanted to say. And, as we know, the Soviet Union became the evil empire and immiserated hundreds of millions of people around the world, and millions of people killed in purges and all the rest of what we know from history. Pavlov, training the dogs, conditioning. You go back to the origins of the Soviet system, and Lenin himself had a fascination with Ivan Pavlov. Why? Well, if he could condition the dogs in this way, why can't we condition the people in this way? If you can rewire the circuitry of animals to react to certain stimuli and do exactly what you want them to, can't you then have the same thing happen with human beings? And this, Lenin said, Lenin was a big fan of Pavlov, even at a time, and it's complicated because, of course, Pavlov almost starved to death because the Soviets were starving everybody because the system was a mess. But later on, they restaffed him up, he had hundreds of scientists, and there are still people who argue, and we don't have full records of it, that there was a much more clear interest and even desire for experimentation on controlling people in a Pavlovian fashion, the way that they controlled or created the conditioning, selective conditioning in the dogs. And so when you want to have a totalitarian society, you have to force people to believe things that are untrue.